Okay.
Good morning. Can you hear us in the audience? Just a thumbs up if you can. Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. All right. Good morning. Let's have the special meeting of the Emergency Preparedness Committee come to order. It's 8:02. And we'll do roll call. Dale, Lynn, Craig,
Here.
Marianne, not here. I think she sent me a note she wouldn't be. Chris, I'm here. Ray is absent, told me he would be. Jerry's in the parking lot. We'll count that as a yes. Vic, Bud, and Randy. Excellent. All right. All present except for Jerry, who's semi-present. All right. Oral communications for items not on the agenda. It's pretty well focused today. All right. I did attach the minutes of both the December 5th meeting and the January 9th meeting. Did everyone have a chance to review them sufficiently to approve them? Absolutely.
I did review the minutes and I sent to Chris, I think, maybe, and maybe Craig. Just a small correction in the minutes for something that was stated by myself, which I did not state, just needed to be corrected in the minutes.
I have those. I have that correction in my email. So that was on the December 5th meeting notes. Okay. Yep. All right. So then any other comments on those? I guess the correct order is to get a motion to approve and then we discuss. So.
Yeah, this is to
approve both
approve with correction for the fire marshal.
with the amendments as submitted by the fire marshal. Agreed. Okay. Any other discussion about those minutes? All right. So I guess all in favor? Aye. Do we have any? Yep, you're gonna abstain on, yeah, I guess we have one motion to abstain. You're also gonna abstain? All right, so any nays? Good, we have 2 abstentions, otherwise all yays. Also approved.
And better than
All
that,
right,
I enter this broadcast to inform the universe that I'm a child of God and being of light, and that I
hello? We hear audio from a member in the audience? Okay, thank you. All right, number 5, the point of today's meeting is the continued discussion of the priorities and preparation for a presentation to the town council. I want to read an email to the group that I got from the town. It was addressed to Brown Act committee chairs. The town council has requested for every Brown Act committee chair to attend a town council meeting and review the current focus of your committee with a presentation. The presentation should be 5 to 10 minutes in length. The presentations are planned to be split between January 22nd, February 12th, and March 12th. Please let us know which date you would prefer. The exact presentation time will be shared closer to each meeting. We are currently in the number 1 slot, the January 22 meeting. I think if we want to maintain that, one of the focuses of today's meeting has to be to come out with at least a pretty strong outline of a presentation. I could imagine we'd have a subcommittee that could work it for the next few days, but the 22nd is Wednesday, Monday the 20th is a holiday. So we have a few days. Review the current focus of your committee with a presentation.
Is this with respect to the overall, a focus of the committee with respect to this subject matter that we're about to discuss? Or are they talking about focus of the committee in a larger sense? I'm a little bit confused by that.
Focus of the committee overall.
Overall.
Yeah. Which has been my point for a while. Maybe I haven't successfully articulated that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, well, a part of the comment that I was going to make today, which is interesting coincidence, is that I saw this exercise not as the, if you will, the focus of the committee in the coming year, which is a rather broad subject, but rather what we wanted to ask the town council to focus on, giving us guidance of where we go with the next steps of how we set these priorities. Now, maybe that's, to some people, that's a distinction without a difference, but to me, that's a very meaningful distinction. My focus has always been in this work, is to try and bring it to the attention of the council, what we saw the priorities were, and get their guidance as to what, if anything, they wanted us to do, which is part of our function. There are a lot of other things that we do that are beyond the setting of these priorities. So I would make that distinction and ask that we be clear in what our purpose is today as we brainstorm about the various things we're going to bring to the attention of the council, what our purpose is.
All right. Any other comments on?
I think it's very clear. We have a date certain of January 22nd to present the objectives of this committee for the coming year to the town council. And so somewhat regardless of this list, but we can use this list as a template and add on to it.
Mm-hmm.
We need to, I think, highlight to the town council via our illustrious chair, our goals, our goals and hopes and wishes for the coming year. And I think that's the purpose. And they said it's like a 10 to 15 minutes. So you got to be
5 to 10.
5 to 10.
Mm.
So it's a pretty, very focused, 6 slides.
Is that 5 to 10 for everything? Is that what your understanding is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Presentation should be 5 to 10 minutes in length.
Chris, I don't think you can have this discussion today if that wasn't an agenda item. So if you're going to
It says
have
very
a discussion
clearly
on the overall focus of the committee, that's different than I think you have labeled this.
read back the agenda item. Discussion of EPC priorities and preparation for presentation to town council. It sounds like exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. It's exactly what we're doing.
Okay, but not necessarily the priorities that Craig put on.
I agree, and I think that's one of the reasons we're having the meeting.
Okay.
I think if we all agreed that was the definitive list, we could have probably ended the discussion last time.
That's right. About which we're not in agreement.
Clearly,
It's not the definitive list, and we're here to discuss that.
right.
So I think we're of the
I
same
think
mind.
we're in the right place. Go ahead.
Chris, how do you see this differing from the charter that we adopted last year? What the council is asking for in the 22nd meeting?
Well, my interpretation is that they are expecting us to show up with something like 3 to 5 priorities for the year. This is what we plan to work on. And we can couch that slightly differently, which is, these are what we think are the most important things for us to work on but we need your buy-in, or we need some guidance, or,
Right,
right, you know,
exactly.
and I think we should spend, quite frankly, one of those 5 pages to recap last year. I think we did a big thing when we got the evacuation plan passed. I think we ought to thank them for it and take some credit for getting it done.
Agreed.
And maybe even use that as the on-ramp to, and we continue to think, you know, among the highest priorities, and I think this is true, but let's try it out. Among the highest priorities for emergency preparedness is to continue to focus on evacuation. There are other issues still to be solved. And, you know, so when we give you the 3 to 5 things we're thinking, you should expect it's going to have a bit about evacuation in there, if not entirely about evacuation. We'll know that before we have to make that statement.
I concur. And whoever's making slides, sometime I put a list of what we accomplished last year.
Yeah.
I have that somewhere.
Oh, good.
I'll send it to you. Because we actually got a lot done besides the
That's
evacuation
fine.
plan. But I'll send it to you.
Okay. But I think there's nothing wrong with having the list we've been debating so far inform today's discussion probably heavily. I mean, I think there's a reason we spent so much time on it. I think there's a reason that there existed a list that had gone to the town council in the past. I think we think evacuation is a very important thing. I think the question is, are there other things? And among them, maybe we should just go down the list. But there is the big question, and it's in one of these items about the EOC philosophy for when does it open, who opens it, and if we even need it. And we could come in with an opinion, or we could just say, we think this is really important to resolve this year, and we'd suggest we make it one of our priorities, but we're going to need to work with you. It's not up to us. We can only give you our inputs, but maybe, you know, if we take that one on, it would be because you want to form a subcommittee to work with us to decide, what does the town EOC do? When does it come into play, and who would staff it, and how can we help?
So I agree. I think that's a very important part of the presentation should be made. As to the rankings, I'll call them the rankings that we've been working on. It seems to me that our presentation, which can be very brief if that's what we're required to do, is what we've done with respect to the rankings and what we're asking them to do, to be very clear. Express that we have worked together and set these rankings up, knowing they're limited resources and there's a certain timetable that we need to work within. And what we're coming before the town council for is to ask their guidance as to how they want us or how they want themselves to proceed to the next stage, which is to implement any one of these priorities or something else, but to report to them what we've accomplished. It seems to me that is, at least from my perspective, the purpose of our presentation at the meeting with respect to the rankings. I don't know if anybody agrees or disagrees with that, but that seems to be very clearly how our subcommittee functions.
I somewhat disagree. I think that the presentation is different than this. There may be some things from this list, but this has, I don't know how many, 14, 10 things. We probably have time for 4 or 5.
Sure, that's right.
You know, and so, you know, I say, okay, the EOC is a line item. Personally, I like widening Alpine Road
Right.
as a line item. After that, we can say that there are other things that they could come from this list or from elsewhere. But we are, like I said, we aren't going to have much time.
This is really a refinement of what was already presented to the town council and that they accepted, isn't it, Vic? Didn't you present a version of this
Yes.
a couple of years ago?
Did you present it, or did you?
No,
Email
what
it
I
to them
did
afterwards.
was I presented these I have to look at my notes
Yeah.
specifically, but as I think an accurate response, I presented these as the items that were actionable based on the earlier reports and the need to set priorities. And I explained that it was my hope that not my hope, but our expectation that our committee would go forward to the next step, and we would report back to them.
So you could present it in block as simply a refinement and not go through all 14 of them.
I don't think there's any need to go through all 14. That's not the goal. I think in fact, Craig and I have worked up a few slides that we're going to use, half a dozen slides or less, that are very simple and straightforward, depending on how our conversation goes today, which basically explains our process and then gives a couple of examples of some of the higher priority items. And then as we see the purpose, turn it to them to look for their guidance as to how they want us to proceed or how they want to proceed with the next step of the process, which I think can be done, Chris, in a relatively short period of time to explain that process and ask for their guidance.
I still think, even without going into the details of this, I mean, this list is all about remaining details, important details. I'm not trying to minimize them, but it's all about evacuation. Right? I mean, in fact, that's where it originated. It's
Yes, I think that's correct.
details that report into the evacuation plan.
Right.
Yeah,
And
these came out of the.
it
fair
feels
and-
to me that if we took a vote, we would all say, and maybe we should do that, but we think continuing refining evacuation plans, responsibilities, et cetera, is one of our most important things.
Chris, I have both a concern and a suggestion for an alternative approach.
All right.
And I hope both of these will be taken in the spirit of, constructive problem solving, which I'm giving them. So my concern is that if we present a list like this that doesn't contain specifics of scoped work and deliverables, and really importantly, who's going to do the work. Because many of these tasks and areas, they span widely different kinds of things that span everything from large-scale multi-million-dollar public work projects to reports that we could provide, that individuals on this committee could do. And so I think I'm concerned that it will set us up for problems because of the ambiguity, because of the lack of ownership of this work. So the alternative, I was thinking about this since last week, I thought about it again this morning. The alternative approach that we could take that I'd like to ask the committee to consider is to put some specificity in terms of deliverables and scope, timeframe, some other types of classification of these, even potential, and this could be, very brief, like, blockers. And then who, I think really importantly, who would be required to do the sort of scope of work that's mentioned. And I think it could be a very good thing if any list that we deliver in terms of priorities has an ownership of it designated as either an individual on this committee or as a subcommittee. And it's critical that whoever those owners are, have signed up for the scope of work that's put down explicitly on this paper that we're delivering to our town. I mean, especially with the increased concern over wildfire safety related to the LA fires, I think taking this seriously and demonstrating what we asked for before, which is this sort of transparency and accountability, I think could set us up to do more effective, impactful work this year. So I guess if other folks on the committee are interested in discussing how we might go about that, I think it could be a really useful discussion.
Yeah, my concern with that, I think that's a good alternate to consider, is that part of the problem is that we're looking for guidance as to who should take, assuming these are efforts that are worthwhile is who should take responsibility, not only who should, but who's capable of taking responsibility. And clearly, our committee, on a very limited number of these, if any, our committee members are not the ones to be doing that. The town staff, limited as it is a major component, unknown component in terms of what they're going to be capable of doing. And part of our reason, to me, a major part of our reason going to town council is to get their guidance as to how they want us to proceed in that regard. I certainly don't want to represent our committee unless we choose to do so intentionally, is willing to take on the responsibility of these tasks. I think it's a much broader question of who's going to do it, and yes, in what timetable. I think asking them to consider the timetable or who they want us to speak to set up the timetable is part of that next step of the process after we get their imprimatur or guidance.
And the only place we differ on that is whether it's guidance or approval. There my buy-in, maybe buy-in instead of guidance.
I think I agree.
Guidance is very broad, and again, it's just my history of dealing with boards of any sort, town, corporate. You outline a problem and then you give them a proposal. What we'd like is you to consider between these two options, A and B, that we think are probably the best course of action for the day, or we've really thought about it and there's really only one good answer, A, up or down kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, at a practical level, I mean, the members of this committee that have decade plus experience in emergency preparedness, and they may not have any bandwidth to actually do substantive time consuming work on particular projects, but their advisory role, they may be interested in advocating for a particular project that could be very large and could be not under the scope of this committee, but they just may want to advocate for that, which could be spending a couple hours a month, if that. Or you could have members of the committee that are interested in doing detailed time consuming work. You know, for example, Rob Young spent 3 months full time, which was such a huge amount of work on the evacuation plan. And that was after 2 years of lead up. I spent about a month full time. And, I've continued to do some work in the background. I shared some links about that. I've shared some of that work with the fire district and school district. And I'm personally interested in doing work around some projects related to big picture document processing and resource management and sharing and especially using AI and other technical tools. And this connects to other work I'm doing with other nonprofit projects. And then I'm specifically interested in a certain project around communication and outreach to parents on school evacuation. And so that's an example of specific things that I'm personally interested in doing this year and in connection to the evacuation subcommittee, which is currently just Dale and I. And so I think we need to be fully aware of and understand that some members of the committee may have other obligations, other priorities, and can make very large contributions through their experience, through their knowledge, through their advising and recommendation. Other members of the committee or the public, or in connection with other committees in our town government, or even connection with the town council, could be engaged in some substantive work projects that are time consuming, potentially even technical. And so there are these different kinds of work products. When you mentioned proposing problems or taking the framework of problems and proposals, I think that's a fantastic one. But I think we need to specify what type of proposal we're making, which again could span from advising to serious projects. But again, I do think identifying owners and who's responsible for the priorities in the list and being concrete about deliverables will I think set us up for, again, both success and effectiveness as a committee.
Yeah, but my concern, I understand what you're raising. I think those are all legitimate points for sure. Is I don't think it's our role to identify beyond what we want to do as a committee, if we know, who's responsible for those things that are beyond scope, for example, in the town, or whether we're going to need other citizen groups to deal with some of these issues. And part of the problem we wrestled in the subcommittee is that some of these proposed goals require clearly people beyond our committee, even assuming we have some volunteers. So that's why we want to go to, it's to me, a major purpose for which we want to go to them is to find out, in light of that, how they want to proceed.
Yeah, and we do have to make some assumptions, and I think we ought to, in our deliberations, assume they have a lot of other big problems on their plate. Not
Exactly.
that they don't think emergency preparedness isn't very important, but they're going to be consumed with other things. And although we have an interim town manager, we still don't have a town manager. And a lot of these things, as we learned, require working hand in hand with town staff, which usually means going through the town manager. So I don't know how much we're going to be able to ask of them. And personally, I am used to this committee actually doing as opposed to just advising. For example, right, there's the concern, maybe this is small, but it could be a reasonable thing to want to get done. The whole mechanism and protocol for communication with the town, the AM radio, right? The AM radio has been lost in limbo. We can't even get to it to change the message anymore. The fire marshal,
No, you can't.
no, you can't, not anymore. Yeah, right, because there's no process, there's no ownership. I mean, that's the kind of thing we could say we want to work on, and we will get that done. Rewriting the town emergency operation plan. We would submit that for their approval. That's something this committee has done in the past. It's something we could
But
sign up
identifying
for.
shelter in place, for example, is just one classic example that we should, that's not our role.
It's not. I agree with that. And so we would also say, look, there are some bigger things we think are really, really important, but they're out of our scope. We would need,
Yeah, I
we would
wouldn't
need-
even include that.
Yeah, well, what
Well-
we included by way of example, Chris, if
Yeah.
I may just stay with that
Yep,
specific
yep.
example, because I think it's the nub of what we're trying to decide collectively here. We don't have the expertise to determine shelter in place, but what we said in here, and I don't remember the
They're,
exact
they're
language.
called TRAs, temporary refuge areas.
Excuse me, what we said in here was that we would facilitate working with the fire department and any other resources to have that accomplished. That was our goal, was to keep that project, if you will, moving forward, add what we could by our expertise, but to get the proper resources, which in my view would be, of course, the fire department being an essential player in all that. So I do want to clarify that some of this anticipated clearly not our doing it,
Right.
facilitating, and in some cases not doing it, another group doing it altogether.
all right, I think Jerry's been waiting for a while.
I think you need to go back to the mission of this committee. And that might even be the start of your presentation as to this is what you've charged us to do. Because I think that mission really talks about simply advising the council about things that need to be done to improve emergency preparedness. Now, I may be remembering it wrong. I read it a number of years ago.
We revised it 2 years ago, Jerry, and we did take ownership for certain things.
That doesn't mean it was that our mission was changed. We
Yes,
just did
was.
it.
We rewrote the mission statement and it was approved by the
Do,
town council.
do you have that?
I got it
have my
somewhere.
computer.
It's in the link that I sent out in the Google Drive. It's right here. It's the EPC Charter 2023. And there was a red line against the previous version. There was sort of a processor from that. But it may be worth reviewing that
Yeah.
to see if we want to edit it for this year, especially in light of this exercise. But again, my concern is that if we approve a list that doesn't have more specifics in terms of deliverables and owners, that we'll end up spending a year doing this and not creating, not being set up to get this work done and have it be, understood and have the cooperation that we'll need for some of the items from the town council, from the fire district,
Yeah.
from other committees, from the town as a whole. So I, I think it would be very beneficial to have a list in with owners in the column. I mean, that column is basically blank in this
Right.
document.
I don't-
The other nice,
I disagree. I don't think we have time to do that today. I
Okay.
think we have to identify the top 5 things. That doesn't mean we won't have other things this committee wants to do.
Okay.
But we need to identify the top 5 things with as much specificity as we can to the town council and get their buy-in. And, you know, in a discussion with Chris, we had, you know, I like specificity, but I'm not sure asking the town council in a 10-minute meeting for guidance is going to help. I think we're going to have to say, we would like to rewrite the EOP so that we can open an EOC. We are going to need some guidance from town council and say that's one of our goals. And if they agree, then they'll hopefully assign someone to work with this on that specific item. That's my viewpoint, because we're now 35 minutes into a 1-hour meeting.
Right,
And
but-
we have nothing on the table.
Right, but that's just emblematic of the problem, which I love specific goals too, but we meet once a month and it's January, which means we've met once. And here we are discussing the fact that we met once and we couldn't quite get there. So I think, you know, perhaps these goals need to be more aspirational and we will work out how to get them done and who's going to own them going forward. I don't know any other way. By the time we have the detailed plan and schedule and who owns it, it's going to be July. And then they may not agree. It seems to me a set of aspirational goals with some specificity, which they can thumbs up, thumbs down, and then we go work the details. And we probably won't get them all done. We rarely do, but we make progress on the most important ones or the ones that we have resources for. I'm okay with that. I know it rubs some people the wrong way because they like having a very specific list of goals. And it's not just here, right? This is forever. Corporate goal systems always got that same issue. It requires you to know all the things you will hit throughout the year to say, in October, we'll do this. And, you know, and in February, you find out that color paint isn't available and there's just nothing you can do, right? And all the goals are blown for the rest of the year, but you still get good things done. I don't know. We just have to deal with the, we have one comment here. What? Oh, sorry.
Maybe. Good morning. Since the town council is so busy and we don't have the staff to help, I went through and made like a specifics for each item. Sent them to Craig, I don't know. Basically identifying who we might work with and what our specific role would be for each item on the list. And since there's nobody else to do the work, I think our committee needs to step up and do some of this work this next year, maybe the next 2 years. If we truly feel that evacuation is important, and we got to give a little bit more time. And I'm willing to work on doing more things. But a lot of them are working with Woodside Fire or the sheriff, starting, and I don't know if they made it to the,
I think I incorporated some of them, yes. So
yeah. So I just wanted to say I did do that and submitted them, and but I feel very strongly that our committee needs to do a little bit more because there's nobody else to do any work. That's my comment. So.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Anyone in the audience?
Chris,
But-
what do you think are the 5 items that you would propose?
Good question. All right. I would propose that it's time to rewrite the town EOP. Because I thought it was important last year. We'd already begun working on it with the town manager when the town manager left, is what is the role of the town EOC? When does it open? Who staffs it? And I think it was already in need then when we had a leader in that position, and I think it's even more so now. It's just another year. it's another year out of date and, point is made, the county rewrote theirs. I think that would be one that both is important and we could accomplish. It would still require their buy-in. It would require the cooperation of the new town manager when he or she comes on board.
And some decisions by them.
Yep. But I think that's important. I would be up for proposing that as something that we could advise on and, work with the subcommittee of the town council and actually do the writing. We've done it before. If they want it, yes, but I would propose.
That's one.
That's one. The number two, and it's a smaller one, I buy into, Ray's proposed goal of fixing the communication infrastructure so that the AM radio actually has an owner or, officially assign it to us, but then give us access to it. We need to be to the room. We need to be able to maintain it, keep it up and running. There's got to be a protocol. There's got to be a way for the fire marshal to be able to change the message on there, for example. I think I would propose that. I think the EOC one's a big one already, but, I think it would, if we were to poll the residents and if I were to poll this team, I think we would all say evacuation continues to be an important concern. I don't know specifically what part of that to address, but we have a subcommittee dedicated to it. We have a list of 14 priorities that we've ranked. And we would like to work with the town council and staff throughout the year to continue to refine the evacuation plan. And we have what we think are literally 14 points that we've already ranked, some of which are big capital projects, some of which are smaller coordination projects. But we think it's important. And I could give you an example, starting with the big capital of what does it take to widen Alpine Road? It's the number one thing we could do to, our opinion, to improve evacuation from the town. That's sort of on the big end and out of our scope, but we think it's important and we'd be willing to dedicate time and resources to help if the town council wants to take that on and put their own subcommittee together for it. There are others on the list and they probably pick 2 or 3 in the scope. I would probably stop there. Instead of 5, I'd say those are the 3.
Can I add?
Yeah, by all means, it was just a straw man, right?
I love those. I would add to the communications. As part of the EOP is how the EOC would communicate with Woodside Fire and so on. We need to upgrade the radios and the protocols.
Yeah.
Which
I agree. We haven't exercised any of that in years.
in years.
If I may, I like that idea quite a bit. I look at the EOC issues as part of the EOP, and you could actually kind of carve that out in the sense that, all right, so the EOP rewriting that might be a very, very big task, but, maybe EOC is a little bit more trackable and something that can be done more quickly. Let me add a 4th one, if I may, which is, and I think it's fairly straightforward and valuable for evacuation. That's figuring out and letting people know where the TRAs are. Because if they can't evacuate, what do you do? And that's just a suggestion.
Would you make that a separate goal or would you make that one of the examples under, we think,
I would make
evacuation?
that under the evacuation. Like,
Yes, I understand, Dale. It's kind of like another subset of the EOP.
Yeah.
The EOP is huge, right?
yeah, EOC, the EOP and EOC go together.
Correct. Yeah, I got
That's
it.
It's 1A.
Got it. Okay, so those are my comments.
All right.
I see that as part of communication, frankly.
And AM radio.
Communication and AM radio. Yep. Okay. Under,
So
and
the-
Jerry?
I just wanted to add that I think integration of CERT is important. Otherwise, the EOC is just sitting there chatting with the county and doesn't know what's going on and doesn't have any information and can't do anything. So I think further integration and actual protocols as to how CERT becomes the action arm for the EOC is pretty logical in my mind.
The only reason I'm doing that for theatrical effect. I was at the board meeting last night. It was the fire marshal for the parent organization to CERT, Emergency Preparedness in Communities. And we had time at the end and I asked the question, how is CERT integrated into the Woodside EOC? And there wasn't a strong, clear answer. It's loosely integrated. It's mentioned in their EOP. It's not something they've drilled. And there was a little bit of, I'm going to call it PTSD. We've tried to go down that path before, and some of the members on the board that had been part of that before were like, oh boy, here we go. Because they're two independent groups. They have different ideas. I think it's a worthy thing to do. I just think it might be really, really hard.
Yeah, I mean, this speaks to my thoughts looking through this list this morning are, where is sort of the current information on this? Where are the links? What's available on the portollavalley.net site? What's available to Woodside Fire District site? What work have we done as a committee on this? What are the documents and reports? What has the Wildfire Preparedness Committee done?
Right.
How are we connected and integrated? Because I think there's information overload. I mean, imagine you're the public. Now you're seeing what's happening with LA and you're saying, what are the preparations for Portola Valley? What website do you go to? Do you go to Woodside Fire District? What do you see on our town website? The Wildfire Preparedness Committee sends out these weekly updates, but there's not integration of the information in a form that I think is able to be effectively digested by the public. And such a big part of reducing the risk and reducing the impact of an emergency involves communication with the public. It involves the preparation of authorities and then the understanding of the public of what they do under some different circumstances. And the public is busy. The public has lives, has jobs, have kids, and so I think, one area that I'm personally interested in, and I think could be a very effective priority of the committee, is information digestion and integration. And now we have amazing technical tools to do this. If you were to say, how would we do this 3 years ago? It is much, much harder. But now with the advances in AI, it is so much more achievable and so much, and I see it as one of the biggest levers, especially that our committee can have and that individuals can have, and combining both the wisdom of the experience of our committee, wisdom of other people who worked on these issues with some of the detailed work can I think really lead to progress in this entire area of like information aggregation, communication, public awareness.
Do we make that a sub bullet under communication?
No,
No.
my personal opinion, we need to get the infrastructure in place and then we can work on that. I am so disappointed in the public. When our fire marshal says they sent out 180 requests to check their property and they get 5 responses. I know in the past, the town sends out postcards. If they get a 4% response, they're happy. I meet people in the town all the time that are not aware that we even have, an evacuation plan, even though we've publicized it every which way to Sunday. So I think it's a laudable goal. I don't think we need to put it on here this year.
Okay. Well,
But I think this gets to a difference. Look, Dale and I are on the evacuation subcommittee. We work closely together in 23. We haven't met since then. We have different views on really important things related to governance, transparency and stuff. Yeah, I tremendously respect Dale's knowledge, his interest, and when he mentions that he thinks something should be top priority, I think that's super, super important. But having a mechanism where people who want to do serious work, whether it's our committee, whether it's other volunteers in town, can do that work. I think that's a really important component. That's why I'm advocating for sort of ownership of these items. If all we have time to do now is vote as a committee on what we think the priorities are, okay. I don't want to stall out the meeting but I'm just I'm concerned about our effectiveness, and I'm concerned about finding a way, better ways to be effective in 2025.
Chris, if I may?
I'd like to, before we continue on, and thank you for walking up to a microphone, because I was going to direct the next question to you. Kim, on what do you think about the goal of clarifying, formalizing the CERT integration into town governance over an emergency?
To answer that specific question, I think it's important. I think everyone historically has spent a lot of years on their individual organizations. And now I think there has been, like, just taking CERT, for example, CERT has come to a level where I think the fire district would accept and buy in to integrating that CERT, which we have. We've already taken steps. There is now CERT. We can call for Woodside CERT team through our dispatch channel whenever we need their assistance for specific things. So that's already a step in a direction to integrate CERT into our system for emergency response. So we are moving forward with that. We're still working on that integration, but that's never been there before. Communications. So let me go back. What I was coming up here for was everyone has valid points on what they're saying, and a lot of things are details within the items that you need to present to the town council. So for the sake of this meeting, it was come up with your 4 or 5 goals. All these other things, those are going to fall within that anyway, but that's not what the town council needs to know. They just need to know what those goals and priorities are. Because when you're meeting to discuss each of these goals here in the committee, that's when all the extra stuff of the concerns, Randy's valid points, all those things will be discussed to group them into those specific discussions. But for the sake of your preparation for your presentation to the council, is here are things. I like the fact that starting with what you chartered into what this committee's mission is, starting with that, say what you've accomplished last year, and then go into what you're looking to do this year. I think what Chris has already put out for your main objectives, it's okay if you've got more, but it's just the main ones. I mean, you can go through the year and add to your list. It's nothing, even this list isn't set in stone, but at least it gives the town council something to chomp on. The whole goal of what they're doing is because of this interim town manager, and as they're trying to move forward, they're kind of regrouping all the committees to find out what the heck is the purpose of all our committees, which this is your time to shine and show the validity of what you guys do and how important this committee is. Now going into, I just wanted to touch on as the infrastructure, because Chris, you brought up CERT. Let's also, we're finally moving forward, not just with that integration, but our communication integration. Because of CERT's radio system that's put in place, we finally will have communication between residents and the fire district. It's going to all be centralized through CERT's radio system, but we are going to have a unified radio communication system that when our dispatch goes, well, not that dispatch goes down, but our communication with Control 1 and our command channels goes down, the radio that is in place, that infrastructure is going to allow us to have communication for what residents needs and using that through CERT and to the fire department. So we're going to have that. So that infrastructure is still in place as far as protocols and procedures of how that's going to be done, but it's there. We're getting there. So we are making a lot of forward motion. So I think sticking to your 4 goals as the year goes, you have these discussions every month. And I think you guys are doing a lot. So don't just, there's a lot going on here, even though sometimes it seems like a lot of talking back and forth, but you need to right now, for the sake of this, stay on task for your presentation. And then, you know, next month's meeting, now you can pull it apart and figure out what you want to add to it.
All right, thank you very much. And maybe we could call the CERT team the Woodside Portola Valley CERT.
I think we've got 3 now. Chris enumerated 3. The only other one for your consideration is our wonderful safety element, which has been lagging in the town for 3 years. And I don't know whether we can ever get to that or not, but I think it's kind of critical, and this committee would play a big role in the safety element. You can include it or not.
Well, the reason we didn't get to it last year was that even when we had a town manager, he didn't have staff to do that. It required a planning manager and there was one other, and they were both unfilled.
Yes, somehow I think by law, we're supposed to have the safety element like this year, isn't that right?
So what was holding up, not just staffing, because there is a large amount that the town needed to do, is the CAL FIRE maps, the LRA. There were a lot of things that the fire district was holding up with the town safety element that they originally had written, that we had comments and feedback that we did not agree nor were supporting, and we weren't going to approve it. So the hold off, so they created these 14 points within the safety element that needed to be addressed. But the only way to address it was heavily weighing on the maps. So the state has sent out letters and notification. We should have the LRA maps. They said January. I'm going January, February, because we've already been getting a lot of communication about it being released with the LA fires, dedicated personnel that were on these. We can only imagine a lot have been deployed for the fires, so there's going to be some delay. So I'm imagining maybe February, we'll be getting those maps. And then we have been holding off with the town, working with them with the safety element because they didn't have a town manager. That's been huge. We can't continue with it. But once it starts moving, I think there's a lot of work and feedback that's going to have to come out of this committee to also review and assist, because we're all going to be advising, well, not the Woodside fire, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done on it. And I think it's important if even this committee or a subcommittee from the EPC kind of adds that into there, is the safety elements really, really important. So we're going to need everyone's work on it.
Chris?
I'm taking note. Yes, sir.
I'm certainly in agreement with the sentiments that have been expressed. There are two specific areas that I remain concerned about, that I think we have some role in. One is the shelter in place. Not to make that decision, but what we identified here as a goal was to help facilitate, meaning do what we can working on, I think it's primarily the fire department, to identify these shelter in place areas. I just think that is an immediate issue of concern to the community. And it is an immediate and real concern in the event of an emergency of fire. I don't think we have clarity on that. And the second area is a practical matter that I think is one we keep kind of not so much ignoring, but not fully appreciating, is the management of all these daytime contractors and employees and coordinating what what they need to know and what they need to do in the event of an emergency. And I think we have a substantial amount of those people working in our community that almost assuredly will be here in the event emergency arises. And I think that deserves a specific identification as something that requires thought. I'm not saying this committee does this, but I'm saying it deserves some guidance by the town council as to who is to address what we're going to do in these two situations.
Vic, I think that could fall under the priority I was proposing, which is public outreach and information aggregation. And Dale, I understand your frustration that the public hasn't read our evacuation plan after we worked so hard on it and often isn't responsive. But I take the opposite conclusion that is a big problem, and it's a point where we can make a lot of progress. And so that's why I'm suggesting it as a priority. And
I guess I saw them as potential sub-bullets of when we talk about the evacuation planning, which we need to continue to refine, and there's a broad spectrum of points. We have a list of 14 items that we've ranked that we think are really important, start with the big capital like widening Alpine Road, but include in that, if you can't evacuate, we really think it's important to work with the local agencies to identify the shelter in place.
The temporary
Locations.
refuge areas, please.
Temporary-
That's the technical name.
Sure. Temporary refuge areas,
Yes.
TRUs,
TRAs.
TRAs.
Right.
yeah, and that's to distinguish from the shelter in place policy of some facilities and all the issues around that, because I think it's important that we understand the difference between
I
those two
agree, Chris.
things.
These fall under the evacuation, but also
As does management of, we have,
contractors.
right. The committee feels it's really important to consider the fact that we have a lot of employees and contractors in town that will be participating in an evacuation. So again, we're telling you, we think that that's one of the most important things for us to work on We have a list of 14 items under that. We can't do them all. We probably can't even do a small handful. But we want to continue to refine that. We'd like a subcommittee of the town council or staff to work with us to continue to
Exactly.
advance that.
And I don't know whether you want to put the AM radio signs under here or under the communications, because personally, I think that for your visitors, your contractors and so on, if they saw a sign entering town in an emergency tuned to 1680, I think that's a big deal. People would, those of us who drive it all the time would ignore it. But when I'm driving on the interstate and I see those signs, I always say, oh, yeah, I better, remember what that is in case, they're going to close the roads. I can turn to that station. And maybe even we could hand them out. The fire department, I know, is handing out things to contractors. They could hand out, turn to 1680 in emergency.
Chris, if I may.
Well, go ahead, Ron.
So I agree with virtually everything that's being said. I like Dale's comments about the 1680 AM. There's one other thing. I know we have tons on the plate already, but I just wanted to bring this up. And I think it goes back to earlier discussion. And that's at some point we're talking about, and I know this is probably out of scope, but we're talking about actually doing drills. And I think that that's possibly way outside our area of responsibility and scope and so forth. But I was just thinking that, we have typically a very low response rate. Well, with events in Los Angeles, maybe there's a bigger appetite now, maybe. Okay, I see a lot of shaking heads, but it's just, I wanted to bring it up. And if it's something that is out of scope, we're not going to touch, so on and so forth. But I remember drills was kind of a big thing.
I think that the fire department's actually got that on their long-term goal, is to move forward sometime within the coming year on these evacuation drills to the community. So
Isn't it in May? Isn't there one in May?
right.
In Portola Valley? Right. We should maybe add that to this, just that we'll support that.
Craig, I like that. I mean, I think the drills are really important. After the notice that was sent out, I think it was last fall. I suggested we, move to something like monthly or quarterly until we get a certain response rate, and really troubleshoot around what are the things we can do to improve that. And I think there is, technical coordination. There's a lot of work that falls out that the fire district may not have bandwidth, but that we could even just coordinate and get other town volunteers to do. And I think there might be, a lot of interest in that. And I think a lot of work we do could end up being that type of work where we coordinate it, we provide infrastructure and knowledge and coordinate other people putting in hours, putting in the elbow grease.
So
So
at this point in
we're-
time, how many, what's the status now? 3 or 4?
I've got 4. I've got the EOP/EOC. I've got communication. I've got evacuation planning and safety element with
Good.
information, aggregation, communication, possibly integrated into the others, possibly next year. Under the evacuation planning, temporary refuge areas and management of daytime employees and contractors.
I support that. Do we make a motion to support that?
I'd like to actually just get keywords from that. So, and then we go for it and I'll read it back in a set of keywords and we go. So I've got EOP/EOC, rewrite EOP, advise or actually help write. What is CERT's role? Communication with the Woodside Fire Protection District and participation in drills and staffing the EOC. Yep. Okay. Anything else under that bullet? Okay, number 2 is communications. And that is, number 1 is the AM radio, which needs protocol, needs technical, it needs ownership,
It needs, you can put signs.
AM radio signs.
Yeah.
And then you said something about new radios.
Talking about upgrading the,
And this is the way to communicate with
Well, with DEM,
Yep.
with Woodside Fire and with CERT.
Okay. Any other bullet points for that one?
Nope.
The next one is evacuation planning. We feel this is an important priority that we want to continue to refine. There are a broad spectrum of activities. We have a list of 14 items that we've discussed and prioritized. And start. It's been updated, but based on previous submission. Okay, and we want to give some examples. One large capital is Biden Alpine Road.
Yeah.
Okay. We have the identified temporary.
Chris, in this area, I'd suggest we include the school shelter in place problem and the parent acceptance of that policy and the risk that poses
See,
for
I
a
disagree.
evacuation order.
I think that's outside our scope.
that's
I think it's
schools.
well outside our scope.
That's the
Well,
school's
I
responsibility.
mean, look, I think we risk, again, I've identified how big a priority I think this is and the reasons why. And I know there's some disagreement about that, but it's, imagine how parents are going to feel, Dale, when they understand that we're, not supporting, that you're not supporting work on that. Like it's weird.
our
Well,
responsibility.
It's weird to me.
But realistically, it's like us taking on the responsibility for evacuation of the sequoias and educating the sequoias. I mean, we have worked, I can't tell you how many meetings we had with all the various school folks. It's their responsibility to determine what they're going to do working with the fire department. We can't dictate that. We can't even, and we have to be very careful. It's because if they want to tell something to their parents, I don't want to
Well, look, I
override
mean,
that.
what we can do and what I've actually even personally signed up to help do is facilitate communication, do further meetings. Like, I sent out this link to you. I sent you.
Oh, great.
So
That's-
you know what the proposal, but Dale, you know what the proposal I made is because I've been making it to you personally now for over a year, and there are concrete things to do. So and I think they could have really meaningful impact. So it's please don't pretend like you don't know of any concrete proposals that we could do, and it's totally outside our hands because you do.
But that's not for that's not for us to do. That's for the town, the school district to do.
It is what we could do is help facilitate those meetings and the digestion of that, because again, just like parents are busy, the school district is very busy. They have trouble putting in, I think, the resources to do the work in terms of hosting the meetings, transcribing the meetings, doing the dissemination of that information to parents. And what I've suggested is doing a couple of waves of that with a targeted group of parents, and then disseminating that information and expanding it to larger and larger groups. So I think there is something really important that could be done there. And I've personally signed up to do that. And I shared this work with you and with the fire district and school district in October. I'm sharing it with the committee today. And so I think it is.
I think we all agree it's important. I just don't know that we actually have any jurisdiction over it. And I think there are state laws that govern it, that they are independent. They have schools must have their own evacuation plans. They're not required.
No, I mean, I think I can follow up and I will, but it's not a matter of jurisdiction. It's a matter of communication.
We could also just be silent on it in this presentation, and that doesn't mean we don't do it. It's just maybe not the one we don't even agree among ourselves. I'd hate to spark a debate between council members as well, but we have a comment here. Could you turn your mic on?
Hi, I'm Kim Cashin. I'm a resident of 15 years here in Portola Valley. I have about 20 years experience writing EOPs, working in EOCs and so forth. I hear loud and clear what you're saying about the parent community. I think that to Dale's comment about how the public is not engaged, I think that the school district, having two kids rise in the school district myself, engaging with them is going to engage with the community here. And so I think that that is a large amount of parents and community that you will be able to connect with and facilitate conversations. I've worked directly with the superintendent for the last 10 years. I think that there is a lot that can be done there. I know that you're saying it's out of your jurisdiction. It's different than what you guys have been accustomed to working with, but I do think that there's a real valid argument in working with the parent community. It's a lot of people in the community that you could engage and really help get prepared for an emergency.
Well, thank you.
And there's some areas where I don't think we can contribute meaningfully. And having been on the PVSD emergency preparedness meetings, gone to those meetings in school district, you know, they're preparing for all different kinds of emergencies, including active shooter at school. And I don't see big problems or gaps in the preparation around that. I do see around wildfire and evacuation, the shelter in place policy. And having had you know, those conversations and attended those meetings, it is a gnarly problem. But it is one that you know, that I'm convinced we can make progress on. And I think being defeatist and you know, blaming parents for not paying attention is completely the wrong approach. And I think we can be proactive in that and really make a difference. And it's just a major risk item for a really terrible situation where there's an evacuation order during school time, and that could lead to, you know, massive loss
Kim,
of life.
is the Woodside Fire in discussions or have discussions with the schools around this? Or is there a vacuum that that doesn't exist?
The schools, we have had discussions on this, and there is a lot of validity to what Kim is stating. The more we engage the parent community with these thoughts, ideas, plans, I think it'll also help in them trusting the system and trusting the communication. But if they don't know about it and they're not well aware, educated on it, it creates that disconnect. But it's not discussed in a vacuum. It's definitely discussed. But I think more conversations need to be had. I'm working with the Ventura County Fire Marshal. We just haven't been able to connect to actually talk to each other regarding this, but because we keep missing each other. But they had, during their fire, they had school sheltering in place. And I wanted to get a debrief on how did that go? What were things learned? What were the problems? What were whatever, so that I can bring it back here and be able to use that as a tool of how we engage our parent community, because the schools have that disconnect. They have the meetings that are not very well attended, where it discuss their emergency protocols, including sheltering in place. And like Randy says, we can't fault parents. You know, they've got things going on, they're busy. But back to Dale's point, as far as being an objective to present to council, I mean, you just saying that you're going to work on evacuation plans and the breakdown of that, and how does that affect our town as a whole, the school districts, you know, just an umbrella. But within the committee, you can, I'm not saying discuss how shelter in place, but maybe use time and conversation of coming up with ideas of, with sheltering in place, what does that mean for everybody? Because that's part of the evacuation plan. Not TRAs, just shelter in place for places like the Sequoias, like schools. And what does that look like for them? Who's going to be coordinating? I think that information to get out there to people, to know that the fire department and that entity discuss and make those decisions. And what happens when that decision is made? What does the fire department do? So all that education needs to happen. But again, not for the sake of this presentation, keeping it just broad. And then as you bring up these subject matters within your committee, they are things that can be discussed later. But to your point, Jerry, we do talk about it, but it still needs a lot of work.
I still think it's kind of out of our scope. I totally respect what Randy's speaking about, but I just think it's out of our scope. We start going down that, I don't know where we stop in terms of getting into other entities' business.
The PTA handled that when my sons were in the school district. They did emergency preparedness. They did presentations. They facilitated drills and actually evacuated the students in a drill working with the county. And they would invite members of this committee to participate as observers.
So one last note I forgot to add. I do agree, though. I'm not sure if this is a task for this committee to take on. This is something that the fire department needs to work on, along with the school district, along with the parents. If further support and information or whatever, maybe we'd say, hey, can a couple of members help us out? But as far as who's in charge and who needs to be front running this, needs to be between the fire department, the school district, parents. That's where that work's going to have to happen.
Good. No, thank you for all that input. I can't agree more that taking care of our kids is most important. I just don't know directly what we would do. But that
Chris,
doesn't
you
mean,
want to summarize
I'm almost there. I'm not quite.
oh, okay, got it. Okay.
The next, I was still going for the kind of 4 examples under the evacuation plan. With the widen Alpine Road, we had temporary refuge areas. We believe it's an immediate area of concern and we'd like to work with outside fire protection. To clarify, what is it we want to do? Is that the right spot?
I thought I had evacuation procedures planned.
However we can help by monitoring you, we'll do that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So updating.
Okay. Okay, we have the management of daytime employees and contractors. I have my note here about including the school evac. We're not in agreement. We have a guest that says it's very important. We had discussion. I'm at the moment inclined to leave it off the list. Not saying no, it's just not going to highlight.
Which one was that? I'm sorry, I didn't.
It was the school.
School, yeah.
Evacuation. What else do we want to mention under evac planning as an example on the 14 items? Anything else that just pops out?
I think that's enough.
Then the next
Those
one
are
was
good.
the safety element.
Yeah.
And my point would be that it was on the agenda I had with the prior town manager, held up by staffing. We are aware that the LRA maps are finally held up by staffing and availability of maps. We understand that the LRA maps are expected in the first quarter. And basically, we're just saying we're expecting to need to be involved. It's
exactly.
it's our wheelhouse and.
It's a placeholder.
Right. And information digestion and summary is something we think could widely benefit. I don't know that we'll get to it this year, but we're putting it also on our list of things that we think are important.
Good job.
What do people think of that list? Information digestion and summary, aggregation and communication. This is trying to gather or help coordinate the disparate places that all this information is available and help guide the public.
It's a good list.
So moved.
Second.
All right.
So
Next-
Chris,
next
this is
step.
what you would, okay.
Yeah, next step.
You're about to go there right now. Here, go ahead.
Yes.
All right, so we have a motion to approve that list.
Yes.
Second, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? You're gonna vote against? Okay.
Who said my name?
Randy.
I did. Not to be difficult, but
No,
I think.
I understand your point. Very clear. Next steps, there's got to be a presentation created. I would think we do one of two ways. We can delegate it to an individual like me, or we could delegate it to the subcommittee that's been working on these priorities.
I think
How
you
about a
should do it.
hybrid?
I think you should do it. You can't do a hybrid.
Well, I don't agree, but I think either is possible. One is, Chris, you do it. I think it's really important you be there as the chair.
Yep.
Presenting this. I think that has the greatest authority. The only question I have is whether it would be useful to have a member of the subcommittee that work with you at the presentation as a, if you will, additional resource. So it's kind of a joint presentation. I think that has a credible appearance. It's not absolutely necessary, but I'd be inclined, and I'm not suggesting that be me by any stretch. I'm just saying somebody from.
I've learned that technique a long time ago when someone raises an issue and says there's something needs to be done.
He was the one who raised it. But in any, regardless of who it is, I think that presents a nice, if you will, credible, broad front.
I would welcome a co-pilot, and I would welcome all members of the committee to try and show up to the town council meeting.
Absolutely.
But what about actually filling out the presentation, getting some feedback so that I don't feel, I mean, I think inside the rules, I could send it to everybody, and as long as you only respond directly back to me, I think that's okay. Or we could just say the subcommittee will review and approve, or you just delegate it to me and I'll. Apparently.
Yeah, I think it's delegated to you, frankly, because I really do. I think that's the efficient way to do it.
I can send you the charter
Thank you.
and the goal, what we've accomplished for the past couple of years.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like the idea of a central point.
Okay.
And that would be you. And with input from individual members.
Okay.
I think that works great.
And what do, I'm thinking about who should be the either co-presenter, or at least we stand there together. And I think logically, Craig, you headed the subcommittee, and Vic, you plowed through this. I think it could be either one or both of you. What do you guys think?
Whatever you're comfortable with, because truly, I don't think there's a strong preference, unless the committee has some preference one way or the other.
I think you should be the presenter.
No, clearly, Chris, I think we were saying that.
I will, but it's good to have
Somebody from the
backup, and there could
subcommittee.
be a clarification.
Right,
And you guys are deeper,
Right.
way deeper into it
right.
than I am.
I will also be there.
You'll also be there. All right, well,
Chris, I just want to remind you, we can't have a quorum of people talking about ideas that you're going to present. That would be a Brown Act problem. So,
right, that's why,
But as long as we've approved him here and he's just presenting him, that's not a problem.
right. I mean, if you're suggesting that you can't have the full committee show up at the town council meeting, I don't think that's right.
I don't know.
Your mic's off. Turn your mic on.
you can't send it to us and to get input.
Right, which is why I suggested the subcommittee, the group. I actually do think I'm going to get clarification. I think if I send it to all of you, you only respond to me.
That's okay.
I think that's okay.
I think so too.
Yes.
But
I understand it.
As long as
let's
there's
let's
no
steer
certain-
clear of anything that could be interpreted differently. And
I think it could be interpreted as a hub and spoke violation.
what's that?
I think that could be interpreted as a hub and spoke violation if it crosses the threshold
Right.
of significance and isn't merely a clarification,
So-
but that's been a very vague boundary in this town for a very long time. So.
All right, well, let's not cross any boundaries.
We don't need it.
I don't think
We heard
everyone needs it.
tonight.
I think I'll ask a few people if that's all right with you guys.
Yeah.
That's the process.
Just do a subset of the committee that was already working on it and go with that.
Perfect. Okay.
So what's the decision here? What am I hearing? That you would present it sole?
Yes.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And then unless you feel you want independently, you feel you should have somebody there, I'm. very
I would
comfortable.
like a minimum of one of you to write there with me to help.
I'll be happy to be there with.
Tough
you.
questions.
Yeah, I'll be happy.
Be
to
under the
there,
table,
unless
you
wanna
guys-
do it to me, either way. Okay,
Your scope of knowledge
You
is
bet.
a little bit broader than that.
okay. So we'll both be there. You tell us who you would
Excellent.
like. to
Thank
be
you.
With you, okay?
We're your wingman.
All right. Appreciate the work, everyone, this morning. It was a
Good session.
good meeting. It was a good
Thank you.
meeting. Lots of ideas, lots of debate, but I think we landed in a good place.
Just a real quick administrative thing. So I
Yes.
have some draft slides. I can send those to you.
Send them to me, please.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I hear a motion to adjourn. Have a
So
second?
move.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Done. It is 9:20. Oh, my gosh.
So Chris, you need to decide to what degree you want to use any of these slides or any slides at all. There are-
I will have slides for sure.
Okay, and
So send me what you got and then
and Craig will share with you what.